today I want you to welcome Glenn Kaplan.
Thank you so much.
So Glenn, I'm not going to jump into the weeds. First off, I really like to find out a little bit about a person, introduce that person to the audience. So in your 1 minute elevator presentation, tell us who Glenn Kaplan is.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So we moved to the East Bay, my family, when I was an infant. So I don't get to say...
From where?
My father was in the military.
Okay,
and
from everywhere.
And I was born, my parents are from Ohio. Mm-hmm. And my father was in the military during the Vietnam time, and he, as a doctor, and he was training to become a full surgeon, and this is actually too much, but he was in Fort Sam Houston, Texas, and in San Antonio, and I was born there, and by the time he had finished his training, the war was over and his service was up, and he had multiple options as to where to go, and one of the options was he specializes in burns, and so he started a burn unit at Alta Bates Hospital in Berkeley. And so I was raised initially in the suburbs, but I went to high school in Oakland. It's called the College Preparatory School in Oakland. And from there, I went to college at Oberlin. And then I went to New York, and I was a journalist for years. And then I got my master's degree in teaching, social studies education.
I was going to ask you what subject.
So I taught American civics. I taught U.S. history. I taught European history in New York while I was helping my friends who were making bars and restaurants. And they built one of the best bar and design companies in the entire city, building restaurants throughout New York City.
So that's what you are now. You have a bar, restaurant, and you're a small businessman now.
Absolutely. So when I was in New York, I had a friend of mine that was an old friend from high school, and he had been doing bars and restaurants and saw what my friends were doing. And I don't know who said what to whom, but we're like, let's go home and do what we learned over the years from our friends and have them come and build a bar for us in Oakland. And we did, and that was about a dozen years ago. And about 12 years ago, after looking at multiple places, we found a place in Uptown Oakland. And when I was a kid, that neighborhood was very much tumbleweeds and it was boarded up and it was dead. But the Fox Theater came in and they refurbished the Fox, and it became an anchor for the neighborhood, and we were part of the first wave. And there's no other way to say it. We got incredibly lucky, and the area exploded, and we were part of that first wave, and we were doing amazing for 8 years until COVID hit. And then COVID destroyed us, as it did the entire bar and restaurant.
That's interesting, because that's a scenario for a lot of small businesses. So are the trials and tribulations that you experienced as a small businessman the reason why you wanted to get into politics, or are there other reasons?
Well, there's a little bit. There's other reasons, but that's part of it. I mean, frankly, as being a small business owner, I was in the trenches, and I was watching what was happening on each layer of government and what type of support we were receiving while we were closed for over 18 months. And then it was swimming upstream in a never-ending battle. And we struggled to receive any grants, loans, and so forth, and we felt, frankly, abandoned by every layer of government, particularly the federal government. We got the initial PPP loan. I don't know if your guests would know what that is, but that was one of the loans that was available to small businesses. You were able to convert it into a grant if you were able to open, but we were never allowed to open, so we could never convert it into a grant.
Catch-22, or just the circumstances that were?
It was the circumstances that were. We got the loan, and it had to be converted to a grant within a certain period of time, and we couldn't do it because we weren't allowed to open. There were times where we could have possibly opened a little bit earlier than we did, but we prized safety first. And the thing that matters most at our bar is the safety of our employees.
Good.
And we have over 30 employees at our bar. It's called Make Westing. It's in downtown Oakland. A lot of people.
So what's the name again?
It's called Make Westing. It's actually
Make Westing.
Jack London short story.
Okay.
We came up with hundreds of different name ideas.
I love
it sounded random.
So let's get, because the issues now that are really irritating and pushing us are politics and the shift between, or the fight between the right and the left, and how delineated everything is. So you were a lifelong Democrat.
That's right.
All right. So tell me a little bit about your journey from, because you're not a Democrat, or you're considering not being a Democrat now. Tell me about your journey from being a Democrat to avoiding the Republican Party side and getting to where you are now.
Well, so It's interesting. It started on a family level. I have two older brothers and my father, and the three of them are both staunch Republicans and conservatives, and my mother and I are very much the liberals in the family. And despite our disagreements, we still get along and love each other and respect each other. And I'm hoping that micro situation could be expanded to a macro situation. What I saw while I was in the past 2 years in the trenches of the small businesses was this constant gridlock and acrimony between two parties and nothing getting done. And one of the main grants for bars and restaurants, they only had enough money for a third of bars and restaurants to receive it. So they basically picked winners and losers. And it was just, I'm struggling to articulate this, but it was just incredibly frustrating.
I got to tell you that struggling to articulate the fact that you were trying to get your business to survive. It's sort of like being in combat. Getting fired at, and I use the analogy, it's like putting out fires at your feet and somebody's asking you the color of the menu.
Right.
What color do you want the menu to be? You're
Exactly.
thinking, oh my God, I'm putting out fires at my feet. So you were going through the process of making sure your business survived because it had been a community staple in your area. Now, you ran into some obstacles, from what I understood from your website when I looked at, or from actually talking with you. You ran into some obstacles because it wasn't just a clear path. Your representation, Barbara Lee is the current congressional representative, right?
Indeed.
And so you talked with her about.
I did. It took some time to finally reach her, but it took over a year and a half to get in touch with her.
Yeah.
And when we did, it was a very, very brief conversation, and it felt like I was impeding on her time. And that baffled me a little bit because I'm a small business owner with over 30 employees in the heart of her district. And you would think that our representative would want to support small businesses.
Right.
And frankly, it felt like we were being neglected. And the conversation was incredibly brief. And the next day, we got an email about commemorative quarters, which is one of the legislations that she was working on while COVID was raging. And in that sense, it felt like Rome was burning while Nero fiddles. And it felt like we were last on the priority list. And frankly, I think that the most important things in our society and our community are our citizens and the small businesses that support them,
right,
and the services that support them, the hospitals, the firemen, the police, but the small businesses create community. And we've created an enormous community at Make Westing, and it's considered the front porch of Oakland, and it is one of the most diverse places on earth. It's black, it's white, it's young, it's old, it's Cal students, it's lawyers, it's everything. And it's a meeting ground for people to talk politics, to talk about warriors and what have you. And also a place for over 30 employees to have a place to get paid.
Yeah, I get that. And that is what community is about. So the issue that kind of frustrates most of us, and I think it frustrates you too, is that the system is broken and we keep butting heads. We're not doing anything about it. So you're a self-proclaimed independent, or are you just now you're an independent?
I'm frustrated. Clearly, I'm definitely frustrated, and I think a lot of people are frustrated with the kindergarten that is the legislative branch at this point. No doubt, the right is I don't even know what the right phrase is, off the ranch.
Right.
But the left, who I had always associated myself with, has been disappointing as well. It seems like both parties are they're in it to get gotcha moments or to maintain their power or what have you.
And part of the problem, and so we're going to get past this because I think we all know there is a problem. We don't really know what the problem is, but part of the problem is that the far right entrenches themselves in their camp. The far left entrenches themselves in their camp. So they spend so much time getting entrenched in their camp and building the little walls around each camp. They're really not doing anything for the society in the middle, which is I think most of us are someplace between the extreme right and the extreme left. So here's the thing. So let's get to this because we could talk all day about issues about broken politics, and it will take more than all day to solve it. So what is a main, not what are all of your issues, but what is a main issue for you that you really want to focus on because you're frustrated? I can see the frustration.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we all want to scream, and we're so frustrated. But what does it mean?
And there are multiple issues.
Yeah.
And before I answer that question, I just want to address one thing that you just said. I feel like on both the left and the right that they're very dogmatic. And I don't trust dogma, and things aren't black and white. There are shades of gray everywhere, and both parties would have you believe that this is absolute or this is absolute when it's not. And so I've never trusted dogma. Whenever someone said like they know the answers or they're certain they're right, I'm incredulous.
Yeah, you start worrying about it because they're the one and only answer. Running politics and managing a civilization or society, it's not rocket science, of course. It's not rocket science. It isn't even really compared to a science, for that matter, where there's one answer. This chemical, that chemical makes one thing, does one thing, or whatever. It is a science. So in the science of running a political campaign, we know that we don't want to alienate one side or the other within limits, because the extremes on both sides, you go, hey, I can't reach you. There's nothing I can really do for you.
Right.
You're just too far. The left and the right, it's just too far. So let's deal with the people who are conservative but reasonable, and are liberal but reasonable, and everybody in between. How do we do that? How do you do that as a candidate?
And I completely agree that our society is becoming more and more stratified. You saw that with the insurrection on January 6th. It's just getting out of hand, and the right will only see the worst in the left, and the left will only see the worst in the
Absolutely.
right, and nothing gets done that way.
And they're all liars. Both sides are liars.
And then in the end, the people that get hurt are the constituents and the small businesses that support them. Yeah. So there was a grant, for example, that would have helped small businesses, but they only funded it for 1 and 3 bars and restaurants. So the other 2/3 didn't get anything. They've tried to replenish this grant 5 times, and it's been blocked in Congress 5 times. It's been incredibly frustrating trying to get anything done that really helps the people in the community. And frankly, I think when you have people that are lifelong politicians, and this is to address one of your initial questions, and one of the things that I would like to
focus on,
that I would like to push,
supporting small business.
Well, certainly supporting small businesses, but also creating term limits for Congress and even the Supreme Court. Our current incumbent has been in power for 24 years. Right. Because she's been in power for 24 years, she can focus on whatever it is that she wants, even if it's a narrow slice of the community or a pet project at the expense of the larger community. Mm-hmm. And I want to focus on the larger community, and I think there needs to be more people getting involved, and more opinions and more options and so forth. And I think people are so disgusted with politics, as am I, that they don't want to touch it. And I was very reluctant to get in this race. This is not a vanity project. This was a matter of like, someone needs to do something and step up because we're not being represented. And I want to see our community thrive. And right now it's struggling. And some of the major issues that we're dealing with are not being focused on.
Absolutely. So, okay, we got a number of things that we bring up generically, term limits. So I think that a lot of people agree that if you're in a particular job and you have no limits to how long you could be there really are no guardrails, of any importance, and you can just kind of go which way, whatever way, and people get sometimes corrupt. Not that I'm saying that the people who are in position are corrupt, but that can happen. Corruption can happen. Also, you get tired of the same grind year after year, decade after decade, so you stop fighting that fight. The fight still needs to be fought, but you get tired of fighting it. I get that. Civil rights was one of those issues. People get tired of, say, don't you get it by now? We all need to be equal. Gay rights, marriage rights, and things like that. So there are a lot of issues that you think, well, don't you get it right now? We're all human beings, so. Some of the things that you have mentioned, you have a website. What's your website?
It's www.GlennKaplan4Congress.com.
Yeah, GlennKaplan4, Kaplan4Congress.com. So we'll put that on the screen too. You are a little bit late into the race, not by intent, but you got into the race because there was a need. You got into the race later. So you don't have very much time to catch up
Right.
So how do you want to get the word out to people? And if you can't get the word out to them right now in this one conversation, how do you want them to get in touch with you?
And that's been happening. And frankly, it has been very difficult to reach the entire district if you really are running a grassroots campaign.
Right.
And this really is a grassroots campaign, as opposed to, say, the incumbent who's saying after 24 years of taking special interest money that she's running a grassroots campaign. That I don't agree with. And frankly, I have committed to not taking any corporate money whatsoever. I don't take any PAC money, any union money. I don't want to be beholden to anyone. And it's another reason why I don't want to be a part of any party, because I want to vote my conscience and vote what I believe is correct. In many respects, you can say I'm an independent in the Bernie Sanders vein. But I think Citizens United was wrongly decided, and I think there's way too much money in politics. And like you said, it's every 2 years in Congress, it's just running and running. If I were to win, I would limit myself to 2 terms. I think there needs to be a whole different segment of society running and coming in. It shouldn't just be lifelong politicians. You should have teachers running. You should have factory workers running. You should have, doctors running. So every different segment of society.
Fresh minds from everywhere.
And every different, a reflection of our entire society should be in Congress. But right now, it's most of the incumbents have been there for decades, and it maintains the status quo. And right now, the status quo isn't working for a lot of people, and it's hurting a lot of people. And our country is becoming more divided than ever. And if we're going to confront issues like COVID or inflation or even issues or confrontations with Russia, we need to be united. And we're more divided than ever.
Absolutely.
And I'm trying to offer a different option, a different alternative. I am generally to the left, but if there's an idea that's from the right that makes sense to me, then I would incorporate it. If there's, and I would hope that someone on the right would do the same for someone on the left.
Exactly.
But we're not seeing that, and it's just constantly this never-ending battle of I'm going to use the expression again, it's a kindergarten.
Yeah.
And it's emotionally and mentally exhausting for all of us. And there's a whole slew of things that personally I would like to see happen that aren't happening. And you were asking some of the things that I would like to see get done. I mentioned term limits, but certainly like single payer healthcare and Medicare for all. A lot of people are getting bankrupt through their healthcare bills.
Yeah,
that's been infuriating. Voting rights have been limited. The infrastructure bill has been tempered and watered down to almost nothing.
So let me ask you a question, just to interrupt, because some of the things that you just mentioned seem to be shiny object type of topics, where you think that would be something that you would, it shouldn't be an issue. Parents should have good health care. Families should have good health. This shouldn't even be an issue. Do you think these are distractions of sorts from getting us to the real meat of politics, the meat of answers? Because we have these stupid little things like you just give an example. So you have gay marriage. And so if the issue, let's get away from Roe v. Wade, but think about the same concept. If you have a man and a man who want to marry, and somebody's making an issue of that scenario, and they're making a big deal of it, isn't that a kind of a distraction from all the other things? Don't you just think that, let's move on? We decided that there's probably nothing wrong with just doing that. Let's just accept it and move on.
Yeah, I would hope that, that people that are against gay marriage would understand that is now settled. I actually have a stake in a gay bar in downtown Oakland, and where we talk about these issues. And I'm completely for gay marriage. I'm completely for, in many respects, what an individual wants to do with their life, so long as it's not hurting or affecting anyone else.
Right.
But there are a whole slew of things that our government can do that can create a more positive society that aren't happening. For example, our military budget is completely bloated. I think we should trim that and redirect some of the money into healthcare, education, science. I'm for progressive taxation, again, so you can take that money and put it into things like firefighters, healthcare, again, teachers getting a reasonable salary. I mean, these things are being put on the back burner, and some of the main issues that we need to work on aren't being addressed because the two sides are constantly at each other's throats and nothing is getting done at the expense of the entire community, and it's infuriating.
One of my main complaints is, and I don't mean to hurt the feelings of the people I'm going to talk about, but one of my main complaints is that an athlete can make 20, 30, 40 million dollars over a 4-year contract. 20, 30, 40 million dollars over a 4-year contract. But a teacher makes 50, 60, 70,000 dollars a year.
Couldn't agree with you more.
That is ridiculous.
It's outrageous. And one of the so I was a journalist before I was a teacher. One of the first columns I ever wrote was in my college newspaper, and that's how I got involved in journalism, was about that very topic. And it was exactly, it's outrageous that, I mean, it's not even 20, 40 million dollars. I mean, some of these players are getting $500 million a year.
$200 million
and teachers are struggling, like they can't afford a home in the Bay Area.
They're buying pencils.
And that's outrageous, and teachers are much more important to society than a wide receiver.
So again,
I agree with you on that.
And I'm trying my best. I'm letting the left in me, because I said I'm sort of middle, I can go left and right in the middle area. I'm letting the left of the middle of me take over and say, I want to be politically correct. I'm not saying that an athlete isn't an important person. Yeah, being able to catch a football, that's a really important skill. Being able to win the Super Bowl, that's really important. And, and things like that. But by comparison, it has an insignificant level of importance to educating the kids. So things like that. Thinking about an issue of athletes and actors making so much more money than social workers or teachers or healthcare, professionals at the lower end, not the surgeons who make $500,000 too. But I'm talking about, I'm going to say lower. I'm not being insulting, but a nurse rather than the key surgeon, the brain surgeon at some major clinic. So there seems to be, that seems to indicate how incredibly broken everything is. If you can have a fist fight between a parent at a Little League game and an umpire because of a call, and sends the guy to the hospital, sends the guy to jail over a call at a Little League game, what's wrong with us?
And I completely hear you. It's infuriating. I mean, obviously, entertainment or bankers or so forth are a necessary part of society, but no one needs to be making more than $10 million a year, even $1 million a year. Yeah. I mean, maybe in the Bay Area you need to, but at this point, given the housing prices. But like, if you're making over $10 million a year, you're doing fine.
You're doing very well.
There needs to be extreme progressive taxation to help the people that aren't doing fine. Yeah. And the gap between the wealthiest 1%, the rich, and the poor is getting ever wider and growing, and it's becoming a chasm, and it's becoming so problematic that, I mean, it's tearing at the very fabric of our society. And I live in Oakland. I'm not certain of the exact numbers, but I was told at a various political event that the homeless population tripled during COVID. Mm-hmm. I mean, people are sleeping on tents in the street and not being able to have food security, have housing, have anything. And again, like we were talking about, teachers struggling to make ends meet, while you have like hedge fund managers or professional baseball players or top actors, owning like 7 homes. It's
7
unnecessary.
Homes and 10 cars.
And it's disgusting. And frankly, like America's become hyper-capitalistic. Mm-hmm. I'm not suggesting that like we end capitalism. So I'm just saying, but hyper-capitalism is problematic.
That's one of the things. I didn't mean to jump in there, but these are some of the things that I think that voters are frustrated about. It's not that. And it's not communism. It's not that we want everybody to make the exact same amount of money.
Right.
There are certain jobs that are far more valuable to society than other jobs. And not that those jobs that aren't as valuable to society are not good jobs.
Yeah.
If you could cure cancer, that is a far more valuable job than, let's say, the person who resoles your shoes. No offense to people who resole shoes. But it's a far more valuable job if you could cure cancer, than the person who paints your car or something like that. Again, not to insult the people who paint cars.
Right.
So when we have a society, and this is what I think that voters are going to going to want a representative to deal with. When we have a society that's so broken and so split that a musician, let's say a recording artist, owns a 50,000 square foot house, 12 cars, has pool tables everywhere, pools everywhere, has parties everywhere, spends money like it's going out of style. And there's a guy sleeping under, a man or woman, sleeping under a freeway overpass in a box. There's something wrong.
I agree.
There's something wrong with that. So maybe if that person who has the 40,000 square foot house could get away with a 20,000 square foot house and 6 cars.
Yeah.
You know, that money that he had pissed away, excuse my French,
yeah,
could have saved hundreds, maybe thousands of people who are living under a freeway.
Yeah.
You know, in a box.
And you think it would be straightforward, but
I
it's
think there's
not.
no question about it, but there isn't.
And our society, in some respects, like prizes the people that make, you know, billionaires and so forth. And I look at them and I'm like, okay, you're, you know, a self-made woman or man.
That's nice.
But nevertheless, I mean, I like, for example, and I can't remember her first name. Is it Mackenzie, who was Bezos' wife?
Oh, okay.
And she's giving away the vast majority of her Amazon wealth to various groups that need it. Mm-hmm. And I think that, I mean, there are people, everyone needs to get more involved within the community. And one of the things I'm most proud of, I mean, I was a journalist and then I was a teacher, but the bar restaurant that I own, it's created community. Mm-hmm. And I love that, and it's brought people together. So if we're gonna make changes, we need to get involved in various groups, and we need to push our political leaders to make the changes to make a better society. The United States, we're supposed to be creating a more perfect union.
Right.
And so for an example, on my end, one of the things that I got involved in was a group called the East Oakland Boxing Association. They're a nonprofit in East Oakland. They get kids off the street. They've got a gym. They've got after-school education programs. They've got a garden. They've got various people coming in and teaching these kids about different things. And it's a way for them to get off the street. And that's something that I support and have given my money to and worked for and have been on the board for years. We need more organizations like that, nonprofits that are, and our bar, we would give to Alameda County Food Bank every month.